Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Today it's modeling paste and stencils. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make the modeling paste any color that you want it to be, how to use it with a stencil, and then there's going to be something rarely seen in any of my videos, and that is the cleaning of the stencil. I don't clean my stencils very often, but when there's a good reason to, I will clean them, and with modeling paste, I do clean my stencils. And then I'm going to show you a way that I use the modeling paste words that we create on my art journal. All right, so let's get started. One of the advantages to using modeling paste is it's easy to make it any color that you want. When you take it straight out of the jar, it is white, and you can use it that way. But if you want to make it a color, it's really easy. All you do is put some of it somewhere, say like in a disposable plastic cup or some kind of container that you want to use, and then mix some paint in with it. It's very much like mixing frosting if you've ever done that. I'm mixing up a pretty big batch of it here, and it happens to be the very end of the jar, so I am scraping every little bit that I can out of there. And of course, when you're doing this, you can do a little bit, you can do a lot, you can do any amount that you want. So now that I've got my cup of modeling paste, it's time to add some color to it. And you can use any color that you want. For what I'm doing with this today, I want it to be black, so I'm going to be adding some heavy body black paint to it. Then it's simply a matter of mixing it up using a fancy tool like a popsicle stick. Now you might be wondering how I so magically knew exactly how much black paint to put in there to give me the exact color that I wanted. And I didn't. I didn't put enough in there for as dark as I wanted it to be, so that's why I'm adding a little bit more here. This is also why it's nice to use a thicker paint when doing this because, again, it's like mixing up frosting. When you're coloring frosting, if you want it to stay thick, you want to add a gel or a thick food coloring to it, but if you add a bunch of watery stuff to it, it's going to thin it down some. So that's why, again, I chose the heavy body paint to do this, is I want the stuff to stay nice and thick. The reason why I wanted black modeling paste for this is because I knew I would have these busy backgrounds here. This happens to be a stenciled background that I made, who knows when, and you probably have some various backgrounds lying around things that you've done that you could do this on top of. I put the stencil on top of it that I want, and then it's a matter of just spreading on that modeling paste. And again, the frosting comparison, I cannot make it enough times here. It's kind of like frosting a cake. I'm gently smearing it across there. I'm not pushing down real hard because I'm not trying to force things. I'm just sliding it along it and it's filling in the stencil. You'll notice how I'm going back to the cup to grab some more modeling paste because one of the things that makes this a lot easier is having enough modeling paste on the tool that you're using to spread it around. The one that I'm using here is an art spatula, but guess what? You can use anything you have that you're comfortable with that you like to spread this on. Using an old hotel key card, a piece of cardboard, any kind of spatula or tool that you like that will get the job done, whatever way you can easily spread that modeling paste on. And again, I'm not being shy as I'm doing this because the trick is to have enough on there. Once you've got it spread around evenly, then you're ready to lift up your stencil. Now, as you lift up the stencil, be prepared. You need a place to put that stencil with the modeling paste on it. And I've got something off camera where I've set it intentionally, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You might be wondering if I'm worried about the stencil slipping as I'm doing this, as I'm going over and over it with the modeling paste as I'm spreading it around. And that very first pass of the modeling paste, yes, I'm holding it carefully there. But after that, the stencil is pretty much holding itself in place. Well, it's really the modeling paste that's in there holding the stencil in place. And so as I'm going over this, I am not worried about this stencil moving at all. What I am worried about is getting the modeling paste even. So that's why you'll see me going back over this, trying to get it smoothed out and nice and even, because I can tell there are some areas where I have more modeling paste than others. And so all you do is simply keep spreading that around, very much like frosting a cake. If you find that you've got way too much in one area, just keep using that spatula to move it around till it's even. Modeling paste does take a little bit to dry, so once you've got the modeling paste on the paper, you want to set it aside and give it a couple hours to dry. Here are those two stencils loaded up with modeling paste already on the next paper that I'm going to do. And the reason why they're already on there is because as soon as I lift them up, I put them on the next piece that I'm going to put it on. That way I don't get any modeling paste where I don't want it to go. And then I simply repeat the process. If you've seen many of my videos, you know that I'm not a big fan of doing gratuitous cleaning. If it doesn't have to be cleaned, why clean it? But modeling paste, this is a time where I do feel like I want to clean it. Because this stuff is so thick, it's so wonderful. I mean, that's what allows you to get all that great texture in it. But having it dry in your supplies, not so great. So with these, I actually do clean them up when I'm done. But we're nowhere near done yet. And part of the reason why we're nowhere near done yet is because if I'm going to take the time to clean stuff up, I'm going to get the maximum use out of it before I have to do the cleaning. So that's why I mixed up a nice size batch of modeling paste and black paint here, because I'm going to do this over and over again. The stencils that I'm using are from the Random Thoughts collection that I designed for over at StencilGirlProducts.com. Every time I'm lifting up a stencil, I'm setting it down on the next paper that I'm going to put the modeling paste on. So why didn't I just do all this in black paint? I wouldn't have to wait for anything to dry. It's a whole lot less cleanup. And I absolutely could have done it in black paint. But the reason that I love modeling paste so much is because of the texture that you get with it. It's turning these words into something very dimensional that I can use in my play. And it's something that when I see it in person, I just want to touch them. I'm a texture person, so I love having that in there. And it's kind of tough to catch on camera here, but basically these words are going to be raised up. Now I'm catching on here. I'm realizing if I want you to see the paper before I put the stencil on top of it, I need to show you what's coming next before I lift this one up. So here's a look at the page I'm going to put that stencil on next so you can see what it looks like before it gets all those letters on it. As I do this next one, I want you to notice how it looks like there's less modeling paste being used. You see how as I kind of spread it around with the spatula that you can still see the stencil underneath it some? Well, that's happening because there is actually less modeling paste. Each time that I go over a paper and do this, it's using up some of the modeling paste. And so I'll keep repeating this over and over again until I've used up all the modeling paste that I possibly can. Modeling paste is going to create texture for you, and it's also going to do something else. It's going to give you really crisp lines. So even though the modeling paste is on there wonderfully thick, when I lift up that stencil, I'm still going to have crisp lines. It's one of the perks of using modeling paste. I very intentionally chose these stencils to do this with so that I would have lots of them. And that's because I use these stencils as some inspiration. When I'm art journaling, when I'm doing a card, when I'm creating, when I'm collaging, sometimes I just need a word, and now I'm going to have pages of them to choose from. I might use the phrases exactly as they are on the stencil, or I'll cut it up and just use one of the words, or rearrange them together and create new phrases with the words that are there. But by having several of these made in advance, that way when I'm art journaling, when I'm playing, I can go in there and grab what I need. And at the end of this video, I'll show you some examples of how I've used that in the play. Now that we're getting to the end of the modeling paste, that means I'm going to do things a little bit differently. And the great thing is, on this piece of paper, when I do the modeling paste on there, I'm going to do something a little different. And that is really one of the cool things about stencils, is you have the flexibility to use them in so many different ways. I mean, after all, stencils are tools the way a paintbrush is a tool, and there's an unlimited number of ways you can use a paintbrush, and the same is true for stencils. But I will say, the more you understand about stencils, the easier it is to get a wide variety of looks from them, the easier it is to get more value out of your stencils. Now, if you're looking for more ways to use your stencils, a deeper understanding of why they do what they do, then check out my workshop, The Joy of Stenciling. Now that I've done a bunch of these, I'm starting to run a little low on the modeling paste. It's not that it's completely gone and it's empty, but it is running low. And so that means to get an entire stencil covered like this is going to be a little bit tricky. But this is a great time for me to show you a different look that you can create with the exact same supplies. This time, I'm going to be putting the modeling paste over just some of the words. And I don't care if I can get an entire word, I just want pieces and parts. And as I'm putting it on, it's also not an even layer of modeling paste anywhere. There's a little bit more here, a little bit less there, and it's going to give it a very different look than if I just covered the entire thing with modeling paste. This will also add touches of texture here and there. So my goal with this is not to cover everything up. It's just to have pieces and parts and little bits here and there. And for that reason, it's a great thing to do at the end of the play when you're starting to run low on modeling paste, because this is where you can start using up any bits that you've got left over. The paper that I'm doing this on is a watercolor paper, and not because I had this grand plan about it, but that's what those backgrounds were on that I wanted to add the words on top of. I happen to use a very thick paper to do this, but guess what? You can use whatever kind of paper you want to use. Just be aware that if you've got a really thin paper and you're putting a lot of modeling paste on it, it may do a little bit of warping or buckling while it's drying. Notice how as I'm putting these last few little touches of some modeling paste words on here, how I'm lifting up the stencil, how I'm holding it up. And that's because I don't want the stencil to touch any of the wet modeling paste that's already on the paper. So that's why I'll kind of aim for a corner over here if I want to get something around the edge, just so I can get it there without getting it on top of any of the other wet modeling paste. Now that I'm all done playing with the modeling paste, it's time to do the cleanup. I'm going to put a piece of cardstock or paper behind the stencil because why waste anything? You can get some great papers even during cleanup. And what I'm doing is just using that spatula to kind of squeegee off as much of the modeling paste as I can. You also want to make sure that you do this while the modeling paste is still wet, because once it's dry, it does not come off this easily. You might have to do this once, twice, 3 times. It really just depends on how much modeling paste is on there. I've done it, I believe, 3 times, but for time, I'm just showing you one of them. I've now got as much of that modeling paste off as I can get with the spatula. So now it's time to bring in the next tool in the arsenal, and that is the baby wipe. I've sped up the camera here because to me, watching cleaning is worse than watching paint dry. The gist of it is you take that baby wipe and you wipe up whatever modeling paste you can. As I'm doing this, you'll notice that I'm going between the rows of words to pull stuff up that way. And also too, once I get a whole bunch of modeling paste onto that baby wipe, it doesn't pull up as much. So that's when I'll get a fresh one. And even though I'm doing cleanup here, there is still a little bit of pattern and color being captured on the paper below. So again, even during cleanup, you can get some fun papers. Once I've got most of the modeling paste off, then I will lightly rinse it under the sink or in some water. But there's basically just a little bit of a residue that's left on there. There's not much modeling paste. Now this is how I choose to clean off my stencils. Could you do it a different way? Could you just take the whole thing loaded with modeling paste and soak it in some water? Absolutely. You can do it in whichever way works for you. I just encourage you to be aware of anything going down the drain. You don't want anything to clog up your drain, and that's a personal preference. It's a personal choice for you about what you want going down there. But for me, this is how I like to clean it. Once your papers are all dry, you've got these great touchable, textured, dimensional words on your papers. And so once you've got these, how can you use them? Well, I love to just cut out various words and use them. And so, like for this one, I found the title that went onto this art journal page. That's where the Don't Stop Believing came from. Now I'm doing these in art journals, but guess what? This works for cards, collages, ATCs, all that kind of stuff too. Now this isn't the only way that you can use modeling paste, and you can use them with more than word stencils. Like this butterfly here, this is done with modeling paste, and I used a butterfly stencil so that I could get the shape without having to cut anything out. The video for how to do that is one of the bonuses for the Joy of Stenciling workshop. There's a link down below with all the details about it. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've had fun, if you've enjoyed yourself, if you found this helpful, I'd so appreciate if you gave the video a thumbs up. And of course, if you know someone that would enjoy this video, share it with them so they can join in the fun too. Well, thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.